I never imagined I'd be a stranger in my own home. That line sounds like something you'd hear in a movie or read in a book where the heroine loses everything. But it became my quiet truth on a Tuesday, just past noon, when the door opened and she walked in. The house had been mine for 6 years, passed down after my mother died. Nestled on the east edge of Ashland, Oregon, it wasn't grand, but it held weight, emotional, physical, spiritual. The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon and lemon oil, like Mom's cleaning day rituals. The wood floors creaked in places only I knew how to step over. The third stair up made a soft click that once made my childhood dog bark every time I came home late. That house had personality. Hers, then mine. I lived alone, peacefully. My work as a freelance interior designer kept me occupied enough, and my clients loved that I worked from a place full of soul, as they put it. I never needed much. A strong cup of coffee, my mother's floral china, a playlist of Ella Fitzgerald, and I could lose myself in sketches and design boards for hours. My father, Barnaby, and I weren't close in a conventional sense. He'd left most of the parenting to my mother. But we stayed in polite touch. Holiday calls, birthday cards, an occasional lunch at that overpriced Italian place he liked. So, when he asked if he could stay, just for a while, I didn't hesitate. "Of course, Dad," I said. "Mi casa es su casa." I should have been more specific. When he showed up 2 days later, she was with him. Cordelia, a woman with a cool smile and high-end luggage. Her voice always carried just enough concern to sound polite and just enough sharpness to leave a mark. "It's just temporary," Dad explained, placing a hand on her back like she was made of porcelain. "She needs somewhere quiet to get back on her feet." Cordelia didn't bring a weekend bag. She brought 5 and a box labeled kitchen essentials. And a dog, a massive German shepherd named Duke, who immediately claimed the spot in front of the fireplace, knocking over one of my potted plants in the process. I stood by the door, still holding my coffee, trying to piece together what was happening. She smiled at me, wide and warm. "You have such a lovely home, Imogen. It has so much potential." I nodded, too stunned to ask what exactly it had potential for. Over the next few hours, the word temporary began to lose shape. Cordelia unpacked books into the living room shelves. She replaced the throw pillows with ones she claimed fit the palette better. She swapped my coffee mugs for matching white ceramic ones that looked like something out of a hotel. "Make yourself at home," I had said when she walked in. She took that to heart. And then some. I tried to stay gracious. I even helped carry one of her boxes upstairs. But when I opened the cabinet to find my mother's mismatched mugs, the ones from flea markets, each with a memory, gone, replaced with a matching set from Crate Barrel, my hands trembled. That night, I watched her laugh with my father over a glass of red wine in the kitchen, using the wine glasses my mother had collected over the years. She stood where my mother once did, humming, swaying, owning the space without hesitation. The next morning, my reading chair had been moved. My mother's rocking chair, tucked in that sunny corner of the living room, had been replaced with a sleek armchair that looked like it belonged in a modern dentist's office. I tried to pretend it didn't bother me. I sat on the new chair. It creaked. The first dinner party happened 3 weeks later. I wasn't consulted. I came home from a site visit to find Cordelia setting the table, humming along to a Spotify jazz playlist. The tablecloth was hers. So were the napkins, the centerpiece, even the candles. My father was laughing in the backyard with his friends, holding Duke on a leash. That night, as I refilled water glasses, one of Cordelia's friends asked me if I was the housekeeper. I smiled, said nothing, but inside, something twisted. "This house," Cordelia said later, standing with a wine glass raised, "represents our new beginning." I stared at her. That night, in my room, the only space that hadn't been infiltrated, I sat on the edge of the bed and replayed the entire evening. The wrong pillows, the replaced mugs, the strangers complimenting her sense of style. I began to see the thread. This wasn't accidental. This was gradual possession. But I told myself I was being dramatic, emotional, petty even. After all, she hadn't been rude. She smiled often, thanked me, complimented me when I brought home flowers. But compliments mean nothing when they replace your memories with a curated aesthetic. The hallway light was different now. She'd replaced the warm bulb with something cooler, more efficient, she said, but it made the hallway feel sterile, lifeless. Then came the comments. This kitchen could be opened up so easily. Does your room get good light in the morning? The floors creak, I'm sure you've noticed. I tried to speak to Dad about it one afternoon while he trimmed the hedges. She's just trying to help, he said, barely looking at me. She has taste. She's been through a lot, Imogen. I know, but it's too much, too fast. I didn't even know she was moving in. He shrugged. She didn't either, really. Things just happened. Sometimes the enemy doesn't knock. They move in with a smile. A week later, I opened the kitchen cabinet and found all my favorite mugs gone. The one with the cracked handle from college, the blue one Mom painted with my name on it. I asked Cordelia if she'd seen them. Oh, she said, wiping down the counter. I thought those were just clutter. The new set looks cleaner. Dad chuckled from the hallway. She's just trying to make things nice, honey. That word again, nice. I nodded, walked to my room, and closed the door quietly. Something was happening. I didn't have the vocabulary for it yet, but I felt it in my bones. The house was still mine, but I was losing it, piece by polite piece. It started with a chair, or rather, the absence of one. I walked into the living room one afternoon and stopped cold. My mother's reading chair, deep green velvet, worn soft on the arms from years of tea-sipping and long novels, was gone. In its place was something sterile, angular, and gray. It looked like a showroom piece, not something anyone would choose to curl up in. I checked the garage. There it was, under a drop cloth, tilted awkwardly beside a box labeled Misk. I didn't say anything that day. I just stood there staring at it, the way you might stare at a gravestone you weren't ready to see. Barnaby came home that evening and noticed nothing. He looked at the new setup in the living room and smiled. Fresh look, he said, sipping his iced tea. Cordelia has an eye for clean lines, don't you think? I wanted to ask what was so wrong with the lines that were already there, the ones that had held me together for years. But I didn't. I simply nodded, folded the laundry in silence, and carried it upstairs. Later that week, I tried to reintroduce some of my mother's heirlooms back into the decor. A ceramic vase from her first apartment, a photo of us at Crater Lake, a hand-painted dish she'd kept on the entry table. One by one, I found them boxed up in the hall closet, labeled to sort. When I asked Cordelia about it, she offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, I thought those were just old pieces. I'm trying to create a cohesive atmosphere. A cohesive atmosphere. That was her reason for erasing my mother. I sat down with Barnaby a few days later, wanting clarity. We hadn't really talked since Cordelia moved in. Not truly. I made tea and invited him to sit with me in the den. He seemed hesitant but followed, sitting across from me like he was bracing for a business meeting. I feel like things are shifting, I started gently. I know Cordelia has good intentions, but some of the changes in the house, they've been hard to process. He looked down at his hands. Change is always a little uncomfortable. She's trying to help. I'm not trying to be difficult, Dad, but this is still my home. Before he could respond, Cordelia entered the room with 2 cups of coffee and that ever-present smile. I figured you two could use something warm. Long talks are best with caffeine, right? She handed Barnaby a mug, then slid onto the arm of his chair like she belonged there. I didn't have the energy to force the conversation back on track. And I noticed something. How her hand rested on his shoulder, how she subtly leaned in every time I spoke. It wasn't just presence, it was positioning. That was the last time I thought I could still reach him. The days grew heavier. Cordelia began sleeping in later, taking over the kitchen well into the morning. One Thursday, I walked downstairs at 6:30 a.m., needing to prep a design call. The minute the kettle hissed, she appeared in the hallway wrapped in a silk robe, brow furrowed. "Could you try keeping it down?" she said, her voice low and sugary. "Some of us aren't on New York time." I offered a tight smile and said nothing. 2 mornings later, I opened the cupboard to find my mother's old coffee mug, the blue one with the floral rim and small chip on the handle, in the trash, not cracked, just discarded. When I pulled it out and rinsed it off, Cordelia looked up from her yogurt bowl and shrugged. "You're not a child anymore, Imogen. Time to use grown-up things." I turned away before she could see my jaw clench. Control doesn't always sound loud. Sometimes it sounds helpful. One Sunday, we hosted brunch. Rather, Cordelia hosted and informed me at the last minute. A table set with pristine white napkins, a fruit platter more art than food, and music playing softly in the background. While pouring coffee, she leaned toward one of Barnaby's friends and said lightly, "She's in her 30s now. Don't you think it's time she had her own place?" I froze. Barnaby laughed in that half-hearted way he did when he didn't know how to respond. "Yeah," the friend added. "My son moved out at 25. He needed that push." I smiled, but the heat in my chest simmered long after the laughter moved on. They were planting seeds in his mind, and he was letting them grow. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed and replayed every word. Every moment I'd swallowed discomfort for the sake of civility. Every look, every box, every misplaced photograph. I woke up with a resolve I hadn't felt in months. After dinner the next day, I asked Barnaby to speak privately. We stood in the hallway, the lighting dim and too yellow. "This is still my home," I said, voice low but firm. "You asked to stay, not the other way around." He sighed. "We're all adults, Imogen. Maybe it's time for new arrangements." He meant it. He saw me as the guest now. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I walked upstairs, boots echoing louder than I intended. When I reached my bedroom door, something stopped me. A note taped to the wood in loopy handwriting. "Please knock. Baby planning discussion later." I peeled it off slowly, read it again, then looked around the hallway, my hallway, and whispered to no one. "I live here, right?" The call came on a rainy Tuesday morning. I'd been sketching at the dining room table, steam rising from my coffee, when the voicemail buzzed through. The local clinic. I played the message, expecting a routine reminder about my mother's records, which I'd kept updated as a form of reverence. Her name still listed for occasional family history checks, blood type references. "Hi, this is Alicia from Ashland Family Practice. Just confirming that we've updated the emergency contact on file for your mother's archived records. As requested, it now reflects Cordelia Whitmore. Let us know if this was a mistake. Thanks." My pen froze mid-line. I called back instantly, voice tight, asking for clarification. The nurse, confused but polite, said the request had been submitted with appropriate documentation. I hung up and drove straight there, wet roads slick beneath my tires. At the front desk, I asked calmly to review the authorization form. The receptionist hesitated, flipped through a folder, then placed a paper in front of me. Cordelia's signature was clear, in her tidy cursive, next to a printed line. "Relationship to patient, domestic partner's family." I didn't make a scene. I nodded, said thank you, and walked out, pulse hammering in my ears. Back home, I confronted Barnaby. He was tightening a bolt on the mailbox, wearing gloves and that look he put on whenever he knew I was about to say something serious. "Dad," I said steady, "why did Cordelia change Mom's emergency contact info?" He looked up, blinking, like the question had come from another universe. "What? She didn't—" "Oh, you mean at the clinic? Must have been a clerical mix-up." "They had a signed request," I replied. "With her name, her handwriting." He sighed, pulling off his gloves. "Look, I'm sure she thought she was helping. She handles things now. You don't need to get worked up over every little form." That wasn't an answer. It was a dodge wrapped in condescension. "In families like ours," I said quietly, "the paperwork always tells the truth before the people do." The next hit came less than a week later. I was trying to schedule a dental cleaning, something I did religiously every 6 months. I gave my information, only to be told my insurance had been dropped. I thought it was a glitch, until the provider confirmed I'd been removed from the policy. "You're no longer listed as a dependent," the representative told me. That change was filed by Barnaby Whitlow. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I texted him that evening while he and Cordelia were watching some home renovation show in the living room. Removed from the insurance? I wrote. His reply came 10 minutes later. You're an adult now, Imogen. It makes sense to start separating things. I thought of what my mother once told me when I was 12 and asked why she never forced Dad to take on more of the parenting. A parent's job isn't done when you move out. It's done when you feel safe to leave. I hadn't moved out. I was being shuffled off the stage. The house began to feel different. The air in the kitchen shifted, less fragrant, more sterile. Cordelia had started sleeping in late, citing back pain and pregnancy symptoms, and complained when I used the kitchen early. I'm not trying to be rude, she said one morning, peering at me through half-lidded eyes. But maybe you could prep your breakfast the night before. Some of us need quiet in the morning. Her tone was laced with suggestion, never accusation. But the message was clear. Soon, my routines were pushed aside. The fridge filled with foods I didn't recognize: chia pudding, prenatal vitamins, organic bone broth. My leftovers mysteriously disappeared. When I found my grocery list missing, I noticed a new one pinned to the fridge in Cordelia's neat handwriting. No strong smells. Avoid garlic. Too much salt. No onions after 6 p.m. Next to it was a Polaroid of Cordelia and Barnaby, laughing in the backyard, arms linked, my space filled with someone else's narrative. You can't say someone is erasing you if they never even say your name. What really twisted the knife was how the language changed. Cordelia began referring to my bedroom as the nursery. She called the living room our family space. She even labeled the old study, my mother's study, as his office. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone in the hallway. We just need her to understand it's time, she whispered. That night, I called my Aunt Marilyn, one of my mother's sisters, someone who never sugarcoated. Cordelia? She said sharply. You know she did this to her last husband's daughter, right? Moved in, took over, then rewrote the whole house. Told everyone the daughter was unstable. It's a pattern. When patterns repeat, I whispered, they're not accidents. They're tactics. That evening, I sat in my room, laptop open. I began backing up everything: financial records, house deeds, passwords, copies of emails, even text threads with Barnaby. I moved important documents into a lockbox I stashed under my bed. I wasn't sure yet what I was preparing for, but I knew something was coming. Then came the envelope. It was thick, beige, with a small return address stamped in the corner. Whitlow Whitmore Household. I stared at it on the counter, unopened, heart heavy. When I finally peeled it open, a folded utility bill fell out, addressed not to me, not even to Barnaby, but to Cordelia Whitmore, primary resident. That night, I whispered into the quiet hallway, to no one in particular. They're not just pushing me out, they're replacing me. The suggestion came like a dart thrown with a smile. We were at brunch, a curated affair Cordelia had orchestrated for some of Barnaby's work colleagues. The table was dressed like a catalog spread: linen napkins, artfully misaligned silverware to make it look effortless, and a vase of tulips in the center that she claimed brought spring into the room, though we were in October. I sat at the far end of the table, closer to the patio door than to my father. Cordelia, as always, occupied the head of the table like it had been built for her. Between bites of quiche, she leaned slightly forward, turned to Barnaby's coworker on her left, and said with a soft chuckle, "Honestly, maybe it's time Imogen started using her mother's last name. It would clear up so much confusion on paperwork." It was said so gently, so playfully, like an afterthought tossed between sips of orange juice. Yet it rang in my ears louder than any direct insult ever could. A few of the guests laughed, not maliciously, just uncomfortably. One even muttered, "Oh, that makes sense." Barnaby didn't laugh, but he didn't scowl either. He glanced at me briefly, then looked down at his plate. "Let's not start this here," he said quietly, and took another bite of toast. Not, "That's inappropriate." Not, "She's my daughter." Just deflection. I stood up 10 minutes later, smiling politely and feigning a sudden work call. As I walked past the kitchen, I caught my own reflection in the microwave door, still, tight-lipped, and more alone than I'd felt in years. They weren't just trying to push me out of the house, I told myself later. They wanted me out of the family tree. It got worse when I went down to the garage looking for my winter coats. It had turned chilly in the mornings, and I remembered packing my heavier sweaters in a box the previous spring. The air in the garage was musty, with that cold cement smell I'd known since childhood. Then I saw it. The neighbor from across the street, Anita, with her always overdone scarves and ever loud voice, was in the backyard wearing the hand-knit sweater my mother had made me in college. Maroon wool, a slightly uneven pattern along the sleeves that made it unmistakably hers. My name had once been stitched on the inside hem, barely noticeable now. I stepped outside, keeping my voice even. "Anita, that sweater looks familiar." "Oh, isn't it great?" she beamed. "Cordelia gave it to me, said it was just lying around unused." It felt like being slapped while everyone else clapped. Back inside, I found Cordelia in the kitchen arranging eucalyptus in a tall glass vase. I didn't mask the tension in my tone. "You gave away my mother's sweater?" She turned slowly, blinking. "What sweater?" I stared at her. "Oh," she said finally, as if the memory were just now coming back. "That old thing? It looked lonely." "Better than collecting dust, don't you think? People like her don't steal things. They just redistribute them without asking." After that, I started noticing things missing. Not stolen, just relocated, repurposed, made to seem obsolete. The vintage lamp from my bedroom, now glowing in what Cordelia called her reading nook in the sunroom. A framed photo of my mother and me at Cannon Beach vanished from the hallway. When I asked about it, she said, "I thought we could freshen up the decor. Too many sad reminders. This house deserves new energy." I started taking photos, cataloging what remained of my presents. I time-stamped everything, from small trinkets to framed art pieces, as if building a silent case only I would ever care about. Because when you're forced to prove you belong in your own home, you've already lost too much. The notes started appearing soon after. Sticky reminders stuck to the fridge, on the bathroom mirror, even on the laundry machine. "Please rinse your dishes. Don't forget to turn off the hallway light. Use coasters next time. Water rings damage wood." These weren't requests. They were declarations of authority. Cordelia wasn't managing a home. She was managing me. Barnaby, when confronted, only shook his head. "She's just trying to keep the peace." Peace. The kind of peace where one person is quiet enough to disappear completely. There's no peace when one side is asked to vanish silently. I began journaling, not as therapy, but as evidence. Every change, every removed object, every coded message hidden in casual conversation. This wasn't just redecorating, it was a campaign. Cordelia had a way of speaking that sounded like care, but landed like dismissal. "I thought this rug was too dark. Don't you think your room feels a bit cluttered? Let's store these books for now. Just for now." Barnaby no longer spoke with warmth when we crossed paths. He echoed her tone, her phrasing. "It's not about the things, Imogen," he'd say. "It's about moving forward." But no one had asked me which direction I wanted to go. That night, while cleaning out one of the hallway drawers, just trying to make sense of the chaos, I opened the velvet-lined compartment that had once held my mother's jewelry box. It was gone. In its place was a clear, geometric tray with Cordelia's bracelets neatly arranged by color. Her scent lingered faintly on the velvet. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I closed the drawer slowly, took a deep breath, and whispered aloud. "She's not just redecorating. She's rewriting history." The invitation came 2 days before the event. A text from Cordelia, oddly formal in tone, read, "Family dinner Friday at 6 p.m. Hosting extended family and some dear friends. Would love for you to help with the table." No question mark. No please. Just a declaration, tucked between a smiley face and a decorative emoji I refused to acknowledge. I didn't respond. But Friday came, and I found myself ironing napkins I didn't pick out, arranging cutlery I didn't choose, setting a table I'd never wanted to share. Cordelia had labeled the evening as family-centered, though I wasn't informed until every seat had been planned, and mine, of course, was at the very end, farthest from my father. She sat beside him, radiant and smug. Her voice sailed effortlessly through conversations about holiday trips and nursery themes. The dining room glowed under her curated lighting, and the music she picked hummed gently through the house. Light jazz, nothing too intrusive. I poured water into glasses, like a hostess in my own home, and heard a woman ask Cordelia, "How long have you two owned this beautiful place?" Cordelia smiled, slow and serene. "We've been building something special here." No mention of me, no correction. Barnaby didn't say a word. He buttered his roll, nodded along, and laughed when someone made a joke about how hard it was to raise adult kids who won't leave. There's no need to lie when silence speaks the betrayal for you. I didn't say anything during the meal, but the wine I sipped burned a little longer in my throat. My fork scraped the plate louder than it should have, and my smile? I'm sure it looked like a crack about to split open. The main course had barely been cleared when Cordelia stood up, gently clinking her fork against her water glass. The room fell quiet. "I know this isn't what we planned to talk about tonight," she began, her hand trembling just enough to sell the performance. "But I need to say something difficult, and I'm asking for compassion." I knew it before she even opened her mouth. "I can't live like this anymore," she said, voice quivering. "I can't live with her." Heads turned. Some guests looked at me. Others avoided my eyes. "She makes me feel like a visitor in my own home," Cordelia went on. "Every time I breathe, I worry I'm doing something wrong. I can't relax. And that's not healthy. Especially now." She turned to Barnaby, took his hand. "It's either me or her." The room sucked in air and held it. No one moved. No one challenged her. They sat, caught between politeness and discomfort, the way people do when a family secret bursts mid-dinner and stains the tablecloth. Barnaby didn't look at me. He stared at his empty plate. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin down. "That's interesting," I said, my voice calm, "considering this house is mine." No one spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was complicit. After the guests left, I stayed in the kitchen to clean up. Barnaby walked in, arms crossed, face pale and unreadable. "She's pregnant," he said flatly. The word hit like a brick. He waited for a reaction. I didn't give him one. "I need this house to be peaceful. For her. For the baby." "You need?" I asked, steady. "You asked to stay here, remember? When everything went sideways after the divorce and the retirement didn't pan out?" He shifted. "And I appreciated that. I did. But you've made things impossible." "I've made things impossible?" I repeated. "I let you stay. I fed you. I gave you space. And now I'm the one who's unwelcome?" He moved toward the hallway without answering. I followed, heart pounding. He reached for the coat rack, grabbed my overnight bag, the one I used for design consultations, and without a word, opened the front door. Snowflakes drifted in. He tossed the bag onto the porch. The thud of it against the wood was louder than it should have been. If you're going to act like a stranger," he said, "then go be one." The door stayed open behind me as I stepped out. I walked barefoot onto the porch. The snow soaked instantly through my socks. I picked up my bag, stared through the window where the light glowed warm, soft, safe. Then the door shut. The sound echoed louder than thunder. I made it to my car on autopilot. The driveway was half shoveled. A shovel leaned against the garage wall. The engine turned over after 2 tries, and the heater blew air that was barely warm. I tried calling Alara, voicemail. I sent a text. "Can I crash tonight?" But it remained unread. I sat there, wrapped in a coat that smelled like the back of the closet, staring through the windshield at the house that no longer looked like mine. My laptop was still inside. So were my client contracts, my backup drive, my mother's letters, even my favorite slippers. You never think the place you feel safest will be the one that locks you out. I didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't have time. I opened the glove box, searching for anything that might ground me. Chapstick, old receipts, a peppermint I didn't trust. And then I saw it. A single key, my mother's spare, worn at the edge, with a tiny heart charm still clinking on the ring. I held it in my palm, cold metal against colder fingers, and whispered, not to the house, not to Barnaby, not even to Cordelia. They may have kicked me out, but this fight, it's just beginning. I woke up on Ilara's couch with the sun already bleeding through the blinds and the unfamiliar scent of citrus cleaner lingering in the air. My neck ached from sleeping in a position no body should endure, and the throw blanket wrapped around me smelled faintly of her dog. My shoes were still damp from the night before. I hadn't dreamed. I was too exhausted. Or maybe my mind just hadn't dared venture anywhere it didn't want to stay. I sat up slowly and grabbed my phone from the coffee table. It had been buzzing off and on while I slept. I scrolled through my notifications. Nothing from Barnaby, nothing from Cordelia. But one post caught my attention immediately. A video, posted publicly to Cordelia's Facebook page. She was crying, softly, not quite sobbing, but with just enough tremble in her voice to make it believable. She sat in what used to be my reading nook, the one with the corner light I'd picked out years ago. The caption read, "Trying to build peace, but some people thrive on conflict. We've all tried our best." There were already over 100 comments. "She's being so brave. Some adult children just never grow up. Cordelia, you deserve better than this toxic environment." I dropped the phone onto my lap, stunned. Ilara walked in from the kitchen holding 2 mugs. She handed me one and raised an eyebrow as I stared blankly ahead. "She weaponized the internet overnight," I muttered. "She knows how to sell a story," Ilara said, setting down her coffee. "And she made you the villain." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because every word Ilara said was already bouncing off the walls of my chest. Later that morning, I drove back to the house. I told myself it was just to collect my things, nothing more. I rehearsed lines in the car, keeping my tone calm, my words legal, exact. I reminded myself I had every right to retrieve my belongings. That this wasn't about confrontation, it was about completion. When I parked out front, I noticed the porch had been swept. The chairs were arranged differently, more centered, more symmetrical, less me. I walked up, tried my key. The lock blinked red. I tried again, still red. I knocked. Once, twice. I stepped back and waited. No one answered. Then a text came through. From Barnaby. "Give us space. We'll talk soon." I stared at the words for what felt like forever. Space? Was I now a threat to be quarantined? I turned slowly, catching the eyes of Mrs. Dalton next door. She was watering her porch plants, but her attention was very much on me. I gave a half nod, trying not to flinch at the way her expression shifted. Curiosity, then pity, then disinterest. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just out, I was exiled. There's a difference between leaving and being locked out. One is choice, the other is exile. Back at Ilara's, I tried to access my cloud storage, my design files, client documents, templates I'd built over a decade. Password rejected. I tried my backup login. Still denied. My stomach sank. Weeks ago, Cordelia had offered to tidy up some of my folders. Said her friend was a digital archivist. I hadn't thought much of it, just nodded, too tired to argue. Now, nothing. I opened my bank app. The joint household account, where I'd covered grocery and repair bills, despite being the only legal owner, was gone. My name removed. "Start printing," Ilara said when I told her. "Screenshots, emails, every bit of it. Start a folder. Call it My Home, My Proof. We build from here." I nodded and got to work. My hands shook with the first few clicks, but steadied as the weight of action settled into place. That afternoon, Barnaby sent another message, this one longer. "You're hurting the baby with all this drama. Think bigger. Let's not escalate. Let's not escalate." And I stared at that phrase like it was written in another language. Cordelia had taken my room, my belongings, my space, my voice, and now I was the one escalating? Cordelia posted again that night, expecting a new life in a peaceful home, #fresh start. The photo was blurry, taken from the hallway, but I could make out my rug, the one with the deep blue pattern my mother had picked out during a weekend trip to Portland. The corner of my bookshelf peeked into the frame. She didn't just take the house. She took the narrative. By evening, Ilara insisted we go back. One last try. She offered to drive. We pulled up just after sunset. The sky was pink with leftover light, and the motion sensor above the garage clicked on as we stepped out. We stood at the door. I knocked again. No answer. Then the doorbell camera lit up. Cordelia's voice came through, smooth and dispassionate. "Please don't cause a scene." My lips parted, but no sound came out. The only thing I could hear was the rustle of the wind against the porch plants. I glanced toward the mailbox. Something was different. I stepped closer. The label had changed. Where it once said Imogen Whitlow, it now read Cordelia Whitmore Barnaby. No and family. No trace of me. I peeled the sticker off in one slow motion. I didn't crumple it. I folded it neatly, walked back to the car, and sat in silence. Alara didn't speak, and I didn't need to cry, because this wasn't grief anymore. It was resolve. "If they won't open the door," I whispered, "then I'll find another way in. One they can't control." It was just after noon when Alara dropped me off down the block. Cordelia and Barnaby were out for the day, Cordelia's prenatal appointment, followed by what she called a much-needed mental health stroll. I hadn't told Alara why I needed to stop by, just that I had something to pick up. She didn't press. I walked through the side gate quietly and entered the garage, using the old keypad. Barnaby hadn't changed that yet. The air was thick with dust and the scent of cardboard and old motor oil. Boxes were stacked high, haphazard in some corners, but one pile near the far wall was organized with unsettling precision. Bright neon labels, bold black Sharpie. Donate. There were 6 boxes. One was marked Old Decor. My stomach turned as I leaned in. Inside were the photo frames from the upstairs hallway, a set of dishes I'd once hand-painted with Mom, and a folder with my high school diploma still inside. Next to it, letters, at least 10 of them, addressed to me in my mother's handwriting. I opened one. "I hope this house always feels like home to you." I sat down right there on the garage floor, the cold cement biting through my jeans. The words blurred as they echoed in my head. They didn't even throw me out with rage. They tried to erase me with a smile. Back at Alara's, I couldn't sit still. My fingers tapped constantly against the tabletop as she stirred a pot of soup. She finally sighed and said, "What happened?" I told her everything. Every label, every box. The letters. "She's calculated," Alara muttered. "This isn't just pettiness, it's warfare. Quiet, smiling warfare." The next morning, I went to the coffee shop near the old high school. I needed air, familiarity. Instead, I got a double shot of humiliation. A neighbor, Marcia from 3 houses down, glanced at me and quickly turned away, pretending to read the paper upside down. And when I stepped in line, someone behind me whispered, "She's back?" I didn't turn around. Later that day, I got a message from Lauren, a girl I hadn't spoken to since senior year. "I didn't think you'd be the type to make trouble for your dad," it read. No greeting, no signature. Just that. I held my phone out to Alara. She didn't even read it all. "Cordelia's controlling the narrative," she said. "You're not losing your space anymore. You're losing your identity in this town. Reputation isn't lost all at once. It's handed away in stories other people tell about you." That night, I started a new folder on my laptop. Her words. Screenshots, social media posts, voicemails, email threads. One post stood out. It was public. Cordelia, smiling gently in the kitchen. Caption. "Some people confuse inheritance with entitlement. A house is more than walls. It's a home when built with love." Over 50 comments, all supportive, all praising her resilience. Barnaby had liked it. His little heart emoji sat there like a scar. I messaged him directly. "I need 10 minutes, alone, just to talk." 3 dots appeared. Then nothing. Later that week, Alara came back from yoga and said, "Claire pulled out of hosting your show." What? Why? She doesn't want to get caught in the middle. A few hours later, I noticed my cousin had unfollowed me on Instagram. Instead, she reposted Cordelia's baby shower invitation, covered in pastel elephants and hashtags like #NewChapter, #RealFamily. I scrolled, numb. Cordelia wasn't just using the pregnancy to manipulate Barnaby. She was using it to build a whole brand. I'm being cast as the villain in a story I never agreed to be part of. That night, I found the last birthday card my mother had given me before she passed. The writing was shaky, but unmistakably hers. "You're not stubborn. You just know when something's wrong. That's your strength." I sat with that for a long time. Then I got to work. A second folder. Timeline. I documented everything: the shift in language, the room reassignments, the phrases she used, the dates she posted, the exact sequence of how she chipped away at me. When people erase your version of the story, you don't argue, you document. I was still compiling screenshots when Alara walked in, her face unreadable. She held up a small flash drive. "I think you're going to want to see this." Alara handed me the flash drive without a word. We were seated at her dining table, cluttered with a laptop, open folders, and 2 untouched mugs of tea. Her expression was unreadable, an eerie calm that unsettled me more than panic ever could. I took the drive, plugged it into my laptop, and clicked open the only video file on it. The first few seconds were shaky. It showed the long dining table in my house during the infamous family dinner Cordelia had hosted. The one where she'd stood, crying, and told everyone she couldn't live with me anymore. But this time, I watched it from Alara's perspective, filmed discreetly from her phone, angled through the slightly ajar pantry door. At first, all I saw were backs and candles. Then came the sound, clear, unmistakable. Cordelia's voice, low, urgent. "Just wait until I give the cue, then follow my lead, okay?" Barnaby murmured something inaudible in reply. The video jumped slightly, and the scene changed. Alara had snuck into the hallway near the guest bathroom. Cordelia was standing in front of the mirror, mumbling to herself. "I can't live like this. I just can't. Every time I walk in, it's like being judged. That's good. That's the line." She practiced it again, then dabbed her eyes with a tissue, took a deep breath, and smiled at her reflection. The clip ended there. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just sat there, frozen, my spine stiff, hands clenched. Alara watched me silently, then said, "You don't have to say anything. I just thought you deserved to see it." Being believed should never feel like a miracle, but it did. After that, everything became action. Alara showed me something else. Her phone, screen already open to a Reddit thread. The subreddit was RR entitled Children, and the post had thousands of upvotes. The title? "Stepdaughter refuses to leave our home, claims ownership." I read in silence, jaw tightening with each sentence. The tone was passive-aggressive, written like someone who'd tried everything. Cordelia described me as hostile, emotionally unstable, prone to mood swings. She said I made her feel unsafe during pregnancy. She used my name once, just once. And that was enough. Screenshots of my art studio, my old bedroom, my bookshelf. "She's been planning this takedown long before you pushed back," Alara muttered, jaw clenched. I stared at the ceiling. My world had shrunk into an internet post and a 7-minute video. But I wasn't done. That night, I created a file on my desktop titled "The House Case." Inside, I began collecting every piece of evidence I had: screenshots of Cordelia's Reddit post, comments, timestamps. I downloaded Alara's video, backed it up twice. I dug up the original deed, scanned the property title, highlighted the section with my name, etched in ink. Every email, every text message from Barnaby that danced around the truth. Every conversation where he told me to calm down, to be gracious. I highlighted the moment he'd thrown my bag into the snow. "You don't just have a case," Alara's lawyer friend said when I met with her the next day. "You have a narrative, and courts love narratives." I wasn't collecting memories anymore. I was preparing evidence. Still, one thread remained unresolved. Barnaby. He hadn't called. Not once. Not after the note. Not after the social posts. Not after the driveway standoff. And I needed to see, for myself, what kind of man he had become. So I texted him. "Coffee. Just you and me. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. The old mill." To my surprise, he replied, "Okay." We met under overcast skies, seated outside with lukewarm coffee between us. He looked older, heavier, not physically, but spiritually, like someone trying to carry a lie for too long. I didn't waste time. I want you to watch something. I pressed play on the video Alara had recorded. I watched his face as Cordelia's voice filled the air. His lips parted, then closed. His eyes flicked away. When it ended, I said nothing. His response? She's pregnant, Imogen. Stress is bad for her. I stared at him, waiting. I mean, she wanted to make it work. I leaned forward. She staged an entire breakdown, manipulated a room full of people, smeared me online, and turned you into a bystander. His shoulders sank. She said you'd twist it. She didn't have to say it. She just needed you to believe it. There's a difference between someone who's blind and someone who closes their eyes. I left without shaking his hand. That night, I looked at Alara and my lawyer and said, "Let's move forward." They drafted the first letter, an official cease and desist addressed to both Cordelia and Barnaby. It demanded the removal of all defamatory content, the return of my property, and the termination of their unauthorized residence. I opened my laptop, created a new folder, and titled it Restoration. "Let's see who's afraid of the truth," I whispered, clicking save. It was a simple transaction, should have been, anyway. I was at the pharmacy, waiting in line with a small bottle of pills for Daisy, my aging terrier who'd been limping more than usual. I handed over my debit card without thinking. The cashier swiped it, then paused, tried again, and again. "I'm sorry," she said. "It's declining." I frowned. "That can't be right. Try again." She did. Same result. I opened my banking app. The screen blinked for a second, then loaded a notification I hadn't seen before. Access restricted. Account privileges removed. I called the bank on the spot, walking out the automatic doors and pacing in the parking lot. "Yes," the representative said politely. "You've been removed as a secondary holder on the joint account. The update was submitted last week and approved by the primary, Mr. Barnaby Whitlow." I hung up and stood there in stunned silence. The cold air stung my face, but I barely noticed it. He didn't just toss my bags. He cut off my air supply. Back at Alara's, I couldn't hide the rage brewing beneath the surface. "This is psychological warfare," she said as I paced her living room. "He's not just choosing her. He's cutting you off to make it impossible to fight back." And then came the envelope. It arrived 2 days later, thin and formal, addressed in Cordelia's meticulous handwriting. Inside was a 3-page invoice. An invoice, itemized, color-coded, and summarized neatly. Groceries, utilities, cleaning services, house repairs. The grand total, $9,482. There was a note stapled to the top. "We believe it's only fair since you refused to contribute to the household." It was signed by Cordelia, but below her signature, in Barnaby's handwriting, one more line. "Let's resolve this peacefully." Alara nearly ripped it in half. "She wants you to pay rent in your own damn house?" I didn't even feel anger in that moment, just a bitter kind of humor. "They've sent me a bill," I whispered, "for existing in my own inheritance." "You're going to respond, right?" Alara asked, breath shallow with fury. "Not directly," I said, "but yes, I will." That afternoon, we went straight to my lawyer's office. Her name was Marianne Leach, and she didn't even sit down before snapping open the envelope and scanning it with narrowed eyes. "This isn't just property harassment," she said. "It's defamation, financial coercion, and it stops now." She pulled out my deed, the one clearly listing me as the sole property owner. "We'll draft a cease and desist," she said, "and after that, a restraining order isn't out of the question." I signed every document she handed me with a steady hand. For the first time since this all began, I felt anchored. Sometimes the strongest move isn't fighting, it's drawing the line and saying, "Not another inch." That evening, I took a picture of the invoice with my phone and texted it to Barnaby. My message was short. "I hope this is the hill you wanted to die on." The read receipt appeared instantly, but no reply. Hours later, while scrolling through my burner social account, the one Cordelia didn't know existed, I saw him. Barnaby had just liked one of her latest posts, a serene photo of her holding her belly, captioned, "Setting healthy boundaries for our growing family." A man can lose his daughter with a single click. I didn't call. I didn't chase. Instead, I made a choice that night, one that would finally, fully, turn the tide. The next Saturday, Alara helped me set up a small dinner gathering at her place. Just 6 people, safe faces, friends who hadn't unfollowed me, hadn't chosen sides, hadn't asked questions with quiet judgment behind them. We sat around her dining table, ironic, I know, and I told the story. I didn't sugarcoat it, I didn't dramatize. I laid it out like an architect's blueprint, methodical, layered. All the way from Cordelia's first compliment about the crown molding to the invoice marked "Final Notice." When I was done, the room was quiet. No one reached for a fork. No one tried to soften the blow with humor. A woman at the end of the table, gray curls pinned behind her ears, leaned in. "Don't let them steal your story," she said. "Tell it before they write it wrong." The next morning, I woke up to an email with the subject line, "Private, FYI only." It was from Cordelia's cousin, a woman I barely knew but had seen at that backyard baby shower months ago. Inside was a single sentence. "Hey, just a heads up, you need to see what they're planning next." The package was small and wrapped in brown paper, with a return address I didn't recognize at first. But when I saw the name, my hands stopped midair. It was from Valerie, Cordelia's cousin. She'd been quiet during all this, keeping her distance, until now. Inside the box was a single envelope, sealed in wax. My mother's handwriting spanned the front. "For Imogen. Open only when you're certain." I didn't hesitate. The letter inside was dated nearly a decade ago, written shortly before her final hospital stay. Her words curved softly across the page. "If you're reading this, you're probably being asked to surrender something that was never anyone else's to take. This house was never just wood and nails. You held it together after I couldn't. That's why I left it to you. Not because I had to. Because I knew you'd guard it." I gripped the paper as if it were her hand. It wasn't just a house. It was her final promise. Alara cried reading it. Then scanned it, printed 2 backup copies, and placed one in our case binder. "This," she said, "isn't just sentiment. It's intent. Legal, emotional, and personal." The next morning, Mary Ann, my attorney, called. "We found something." In the original estate packet, buried in an appendix of the notarized will, was a clause so specific I nearly laughed. Any party residing in the home who pursued ownership through character defamation, coercion, or public misrepresentation would immediately forfeit all rights to continued residence or benefit. A clause written in plain language. Mary Ann's voice sharpened with focus. "She covered you. Your mother knew someone would try this." We added it to the packet. Screenshots, video footage, the letter, the clause, the invoice Cordelia had sent, the property deed, photos of the donation-labeled boxes, my own documentation log. The case wasn't just solid, it was undeniable. Sometimes the best revenge is a signature from the past. The day of the mediation felt like a final chapter already writing itself. Barnaby and Cordelia walked in first, hands clasped, trying too hard not to look affected. She wore beige, soft, gentle, maternal. He looked tired, hollowed out. I didn't greet them. Alara sat to my left, calm. Mary Ann to my right, fire in her voice even when she whispered. The mediator was an older man with a tone that suggested he'd seen every kind of dysfunction. "We're here to clarify property ownership and address claims of defamation, psychological duress, and misuse of legal authority," he opened. Mary Ann took over. She didn't raise her voice once. She presented each document like laying bricks. The house deed, the Reddit posts, the dinner video, the letter, the clause, the invoice. She read Cordelia's words aloud, line by line. Cordelia started fidgeting, then crying. Barnaby shrank back with every second. When it came time for their rebuttal, Cordelia started with tremors in her voice. "I was under stress, pregnant. I wasn't trying to deceive." The mediator stopped her. Pregnancy is not a shield from accountability. Cordelia turned to Barnaby as if silently begging him to interject. He stared down at the table. Within 20 minutes, it was done. The ruling, Imogen Whitlow retains full ownership. All parties residing illegally must vacate within 14 days. Any further contact without legal counsel would be considered harassment. Cordelia gasped. Barnaby didn't look at me. Justice isn't loud. Sometimes it just sits at a table and reads the truth aloud. We walked out into the morning sun. Elara looped her arm through mine. That house never made you strong, she said softly. You were always strong. The house just reflected it. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Later that evening, my phone buzzed, a voicemail. It was Barnaby. I didn't protect you. I chose comfort over truth. I let her decide who you were, and I watched you disappear from my own home. I don't know if I can fix that. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. I didn't call back, not out of spite, but peace. The next day, I drove past the house. There was a moving van in the driveway. The porch was cluttered with boxes. For a moment, I slowed, pulling to the curb just before the mailbox. There, nestled among the circulars, was a white envelope. My name in Cordelia's neat, dramatic script. I opened it on the hood of my car. The note was short. You won the house, but you'll never understand why I needed to take it from you. When I opened the front door again, the air felt still, not heavy, just still. No voices echoing from the living room, no shoes lined neatly by the wall, no faint sound of Duke's claws ticking across the hardwood floor. It was quiet in a way the house hadn't been for months. The stillness didn't ask for anything. It simply existed. The living room looked oddly larger. The furniture had been rearranged, again, but now that Cordelia and Barnaby were gone, it felt temporary, like something I could undo with a deep breath and enough intention. A throw pillow with the letter W in script embroidery still sat crooked on the couch. I picked it up, hesitated, and gently placed it in a donation pile I'd started the day before. In the kitchen, I opened the drawers, checking what had survived. In the top right one, folded neatly next to a pad of sticky notes and a half-used roll of tape, was the last message Cordelia had left behind. Please rinse your dishes. I held it between my fingers for a second. It didn't sting like it used to. I crumpled it, not in anger, but in quiet finality, and dropped it into the trash bin. Peace doesn't shout when it arrives. It just sits quietly where chaos once lived. The next few days moved with the rhythm of soft restoration. I cleaned, not out of duty, but for something deeper. It was a ritual, one that helped sweep out the invisible residue of being erased. Some of Cordelia's belongings remained. An air diffuser, a ceramic owl, a motivational poster in cursive that read, "Grace lives here." I boxed them up one by one, labeling them without emotion. Miss, return to sender. In the hallway closet, I found a cardboard box labeled junk. I opened it with low expectations. Inside was my childhood sketchbook, a third-grade crayon drawing of me holding my mother's hand outside the old elementary school, a pressed flower tucked between pages. A birthday card Mom had made from construction paper, taped shut with love and glitter. They tried to reduce me to storage. I unpacked myself piece by piece. I turned the couch to face the window again, lit a candle my mom had always kept for good days, played that worn Nina Simone record. The house didn't resist the change. It welcomed it. Then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. Imogen. Barnaby's voice was rough, like it hadn't been used for anything honest in a long time. I never protected you the way I should have. I let comfort win. I let her change me. And when you needed me to remember who you were, I chose silence. There was a pause, then static, then, I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to hear me say it out loud. I listened to it 3 times. I deleted it on the 4th. I wrote a letter that evening. I didn't send it. Dear Dad, I accept your apology, but I've outgrown your silence. Some relationships don't end. They dissolve into distance. The next morning, I walked down to the county recorder's office and updated the deed, sole occupancy, sole inheritance, long-term designation under my name only. No hyphenated entries, no subclauses. Whitlow. Period. I walked home with the stamped copy in my purse. I didn't stop for coffee. I didn't call anyone. I walked straight to the smallest room in the house. The room once labeled nursery was now mine. I painted the walls a deep green, the kind that felt like forest and breath and steadiness. I ordered bookshelves, filled them with the stories I'd put off reading. I called it my library, my retreat, my reclaim. A week later, I ordered a nameplate online. It arrived in a soft velvet pouch. The Whitlow Home, Est, 1987. I hung it beside the front door, just above the bell. I put back the old curtains, not because I couldn't afford new ones, but because those were the ones my mother sewed. With floral edges and tiny sun-faded spots from years of light filtering in through the glass. In the hallway, the photo of me and Mom went back up. Same nail, same frame. First thing you see when you walk in. Ilara came by that weekend with paint rollers, old shirts, and a bottle of cheap red wine. We tackled the master bedroom together, rolling over the soft mint green Cordelia had insisted was calming for a baby. "I never thought this color suited you," Ilara said, dipping her roller again. "Me neither," I replied, watching it disappear under a strong cream hue. We didn't need grand speeches. The silence we shared was one of survival, of growth, of mutual recognition. We sat on the floor after, legs stretched, sipping wine out of mismatched mugs. Winning isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like sleeping through the night without waking up angry. Later that night, I stood in the hallway with a final photo frame in hand, one of Mom in the garden, sleeves rolled, eyes squinting from the sun. As I placed it gently on the last empty hook, the doorbell rang. A delivery man stood outside, holding a small, padded envelope. "From Cordelia Whitmore," he said, confirming the name. I took it without a word. And for the first time in a long time, my hands didn't shake. The envelope sat on the edge of my kitchen table for 2 days before I touched it again. The handwriting was unmistakable. Cordelia's. Sharp, tall letters. The kind that looked like they were trying too hard not to lean. I finally opened it on a Sunday morning. It wasn't long, just 2 pages, handwritten. The tone flickered between excuses and subtle jabs. She blamed the pregnancy, the hormones, the pressure from others, the isolation. She claimed she was manipulated too. But the last line made it clear. You got what you wanted. Enjoy it. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I stood, walked out to the garden, struck a match, and burned the letter. Watched the paper curl and blacken, flake into ash. The wind caught it and carried the pieces away. Some apologies aren't closure, they're just proof you were right to walk away. That same week, I got a call from Ilara. The community board reposted the court summary. Local press picked it up. The article's title was simple. Ashland woman reclaims inherited home after legal battle. Within hours, my inbox was full, mostly from strangers. Some messages carried support. Others called me entitled. A few said I should have been grateful to have a family at all. I ignored most of them. But then I opened my blog, quiet, dusty, barely updated for a year, and wrote a post. I titled it, "The House They Tried to Erase Me From." I didn't hold back. I told the truth, not to seek pity, but to own the narrative. No one stole my house. They tried to steal my silence, and failed. That post was shared hundreds of times within the week. Advocacy groups for women in inheritance disputes reached out. One lawyer messaged, "You have no idea how common your story is." A week later, I filed paperwork to register Inheritance Voice, a nonprofit offering guidance to women who found themselves in similar legal limbos, where law and family blurred and betrayal felt polite. I wrote articles. I spoke at community centers. I helped one woman file for an emergency injunction when her brother changed the locks on her inherited home. One day, I received an email from a woman in Montana. "I found your blog. I was scared to fight, but I'm not anymore. Your story saved me." That was the moment I decided to visit her. No, not the woman in Montana, my mother. I drove to the cemetery, deed in hand, I hadn't been back since the ruling. I knelt at her grave, placed the document beside the headstone, and just sat. You didn't just leave me a home, Mom. You left me a spine. Later that month, I received one more message, this time from Barnaby. He asked to meet. Just once. No expectations. And we met at a diner halfway between our towns. I chose the seat near the window. He came in looking older than I remembered. Not from age, just wear. He didn't order anything. Just sat and said, "I left her." I nodded. "I was weak," he added. "Scared, ashamed. I let someone else tell me who you were, and I let it be easier to believe them." I waited. He didn't ask to come back. "I know this doesn't fix anything," he said, but I needed to say it. I finished my coffee, then stood. "My peace doesn't need you in it anymore. But thank you for saying that." We didn't hug. We didn't promise to talk again. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in. It's about closing the door without hate. Back at the house, final renovations were complete. The wallpaper Cordelia had hung in the dining room was gone, replaced by a clean coat of soft ivory. The air felt light again. I framed my mother's banana bread recipe, the one she used every Christmas, and hung it in the kitchen. And the garden, long ignored, had started to bloom again. Lavender, tomatoes, snapdragons. They didn't grow in the same places as before, but they grew. The smallest room, once a nursery, was now my sanctuary. Bookshelves lined with stories I was finally ready to read. A window seat built from reclaimed wood, the cushions stitched with fabric from one of Mom's old quilts. And on the wall, where Cordelia once removed my mother's chair, I'd placed a single framed photo. Me, at 6, standing in the kitchen with flour on my nose, my mother behind me, hands on my shoulders, both of us laughing. They wrote over my story once, but I didn't erase theirs. I just turned the page. The next morning, I opened my laptop to a message from a publishing house. "Have you ever thought about turning this into a memoir?"